Thank you very much, Garrett, and thanks for inviting me here tonight. Actually, when I first submitted the name for my speech, I work at a tech investment firm, so Garrett said, what are you going to talk about? And I said, tech investments. And he said, you have to do better than that. And I said, well, that's what I do. Give me an example. He said, well, the name of one of the other speeches is Daphne Azer, Cambridge University, A Transcription Factors Search, A Journey from Biology to Physics to Computer Science and Back Again. So now I'm very self-conscious, and I'm thinking I'm one of the only non-academics who had the privilege of speaking tonight. So I have to come up with a really long title like this. How information technology is permeating other areas of the economy and the world, which really means tech investing. And you can imagine my surprise when I showed up and got this card, and the third one listed is Garrett Turner, come with me. Garrett, you got to do better than that. But kidding aside, I do work in tech investments. Silver Lake is a firm that I joined about 12 years ago. The way to think about our firm is you have a lot of technology investment firms that are really venture capital firms. So they're focused on investing small amounts of money in a large number of very small companies that are very early stage and trying to get them off the ground and helping them grow. On the other end of the spectrum, you have other private equity investment firms that are sometimes known as leveraged buyout firms that typically focus on large-scale companies, but they're usually avoiding companies like technology companies because they're looking for supermarkets and women's apparel and healthcare and things where they can put a lot of debt on the companies, have stable cash flows, and then pay down debt, similar to how you might pay down a mortgage in your home. And Silver Lake's a little bit unique because we actually focus on large-scale companies, but generally in the tech sector. And so we have about $23 billion of assets under management. We only own private companies. Some of the names, consumer names that we've been involved in have been Skype, GoDaddy, and others. And we're currently in the news a lot around the take private of Dell with Michael Dell. So really there's two things that qualify me to speak here tonight. One is, I think, the positioning of our firm. Two is the fact that I'm the cousin of the conference organizer, Michael Pohl. Those are my two big credentials, not necessarily in that order. So the last time somebody probably told you that technology was going to permeate the whole economy and take over the world was probably 1999 and 2000. And what I've done here is I've graphed the NASDAQ stock performance versus the S&P 500. So S&P 500 are the 500 largest companies in the economy, as we learned from one of the previous presentations. And the NASDAQ is the tech investment index. And as you can see, in 99 and 2000, people said a lot of things like the title of my presentation, got really excited about the future value of technology companies. Literally, those stocks almost quadrupled in the course of a year, and then they came crashing down. So people are often very wary when you say tech's about to take over the world as to what exactly does that mean, and does it mean there's going to be another crash coming. But actually, if you look underneath the covers and you see what tech's been doing in the economy, it's really that the markets have overreacted on both sides of the equation, kind of sending the valuations of the stocks dramatically higher and then dramatically lower and then back up again. Whereas if you look at what's been happening in IT over a long period of time, IT being information technology, it's really been a driving force of the economy generally. And actually, there's a lot of studies that show that the standard of living and bringing people out of poverty, a lot of it has to do these days with having tech connectivity in those different countries. Just like it was years ago, building bridges and access to water and highways. Now a lot of that's the information superhighway. And so when you look over a very long period of time, so this is 50 years in the U.S., what percentage of total capital spending in the U.S. economy comes from technology? It's really been up and to the right with some blips over a very long period of time. And if you look at, on the right-hand side, how much e-commerce has been as a percentage of total retail, it's been kind of a slow and steady march up and to the right. And so one of the important counterintuitive takeaways here is that the markets get really excited one way or another. But in fact, you have to look at the underlying fundamentals. And the underlying fundamentals are that technology is becoming a more and more important part of our lives. And one of the things that one of the theses that I'm going to walk you through tonight that has to do with Interwoven is that I think that really what made technology successful in the last 20 or 30 years is not necessarily the technology itself, but it was when technologists realized that they could collaborate and affect and inspire people in different end markets of the economy, whether it's healthcare, automotive, financial services. It was only when bringing together technology with those end markets did the real value of technology occur and manifest itself. So what do I mean by that? If you look back, there you go. If you look back in the early 2000s, when everybody was getting excited about tech, they were buying a lot of infrastructure. Okay, what do I mean by that? They were buying servers from HP. They were buying routers from Cisco. They were buying databases from Oracle. They were buying services from IBM. They were buying huge amounts of computers and networking equipment. But the problem was they didn't really think what they were going to do with that stuff. It's kind of like buying your first computer at home. You get really excited. You spend a lot of money on it. You buy the computer. You put Windows on it. You put antivirus. And you kind of sit there and you realize I have no applications. So what am I going to do with this thing? It's only when you start to apply the technology that you've acquired to these different parts of the economy, parts of your life, that you get value out of your computer. And so the same thing really happened in industry where people bought just tremendous amounts of gear in 2000. And then the market came crashing down. The stock market came crashing down because people had all this inventory of stuff and they didn't know what to do with it. What's happened over the last 13 years is really that people have taken all of this infrastructure and they figure it out. How do I get into my mind that I not only have to be a technologist, but I also have to understand healthcare or media or energy and power or consumer or financials and really understand not only the technology but also the end market. And it's this idea of cross-pollination of Interwoven that we're talking about tonight that really makes technology improve the quality of life and improve the economy. So if you look at what happened in this most recent recession that we're in now and you compare it to the recession of 2001, it's dramatically different, which is that in 2001, people were actually blaming technology for the excesses that led to the economic collapse. You had the dot-coms bubble, you had the excess inventory that I talked about. And so people were saying, tech, it's this thing over to the side, it's the cause of all of our evils, it's dead. What you see now when you listen to economists, when you listen to government officials, they actually view technology as part of the solution. So people are saying to themselves, how can I invest in technology to increase my revenue, decrease my costs? And if you do a survey of CEOs in other industries, again, it's not technology CEOs, it's CEOs in other industries from technology on the left-hand side here. 6 of the top 10 most strategic priorities in their companies today have to do with tech. It's things like innovation in products. It's things like new marketing channels. It's things like investing in clean tech. So technology is no longer kind of a sector unto itself anymore. It's more of a tool that people are trying to use in these various end markets. Apparently, the tools are still improving. But what you see is even in the worst recession since the Great Depression, in our lifetime, technology spend actually increased in every single sector of the economy from 2008 to 2012, which was remarkable because technology is usually viewed as being more volatile, usually viewed as nice to have. Here you see that in financials and consumer industrials, energy and power, communications and media, healthcare, every single one actually increased their spend in tech from 2008 to 2012. So let's talk about how tech has affected specific end markets of the economy. Again, the idea of not just having technology, but finding a vertical, finding a sector, and transforming that sector through tech. So I'll give you a few quick examples here, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into 2, which are financials and consumer. I'll give you the example of healthcare, for example. One big trend is electronic medical records. So when you go to the doctor, the idea that you have to tell them every time what your medical history is, what your allergies are. They're unable to pull up x-rays that you may have had at another doctor. That's something that's changing. Another thing that's changing, you may have heard this concept of big data. There's a lot of people advertising about this on television now. Well, the idea of big data is that you have so much data out there and you have so much computing power out there, so how can you put that to good use in an industry? I talked to a company a month or two ago that is actually taking people's CAT scans and x-rays, and rather than only having the doctor look at it, they're running that pattern across millions of other people who have had CAT scans and x-rays taken to try to identify patterns and help the doctor out by saying, hey, you might want to look over here because we actually just checked that across a million other people who had that disease. So that's an example of how having the technology, applying it to healthcare can really change things. An example with more levity here in communications and media is the idea that new artists in media can be heard by millions of people in a very short period of time, whereas years ago they would have to go through middlemen in order to reach an audience. Michael, my cousin, has his own website, and he's had his own website for the last 5 or 6 years to distribute his music. So here we've pointed out that within a couple months of releasing the song Gangnam Style, I think the world spent 12,500 person years on YouTube watching that video. That's an industry that if you didn't have the compute power, you wouldn't be able to produce that type of result. Let's take something like energy and power, inspirational talk that we had before about photosynthesis. In energy and power, it used to be that if you wanted to figure out where to drill an oil well, you would go out on a truck with a guy in a hard hat who would kind of look at the rock formations, put his finger in the air, point to the ground and said, this is a pretty good place to drill. Sometimes the guy was right, sometimes the guy was wrong. Today, there's seismic imaging that you can do to basically model exactly what's going on under the surface of the Earth using the sonic waves that are coming back from the Earth. And you can know exactly where to drill to get the most oil. So that not only makes the oil companies more productive, but it also means you have to drill fewer wells, less waste in the economy, less waste in the environment, and at least keep the Earth a better place until our friends figure out the photosynthesis answer. I'll talk to you about 2 other industries where there's more specific examples in financial services and in consumer here. Financial services, I was looking for an industry that's been fundamentally transformed by technology over the past 30 years, and one that people would understand. And I actually got lucky because it's exactly almost the day, the 30-year anniversary of the film Trading Places. So if you look at what an exciting day on the trading floor looked like in 1983, that's over here with Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy throwing pieces of paper up in the air to execute trades. If you look at how stocks are trading today, the costs of that have gone dramatically down. Again, it's democratized the market because you don't need to go through a middleman that happens to have paid for a place on the floor of the exchange. And then an exciting day on the trading floor in 2013 looks a lot like this. What you see is just a lot of efficiency where you would have had to go through these folks in the past. Now, just since the 1980s, you've had about a 16-fold increase in the amount of volumes that the stock market can handle. Again, it's not just having the technology, it's figuring out what the right area of the economy to get the best thinkers from not only technology industry but also financial services industry to figure out how you best architect those solutions to make the stock market more efficient.